annotations in the ledger, holding the book toward the fire for the light. And he asked him what was his purpose in all this. The judge's quill ceased its scratching. He looked at Toadvine, then he continued to write again. Toadvine spat into the fire. The judge wrote on, and then he folded the ledger shut and laid it to one side, and pressed his hands together and passed them down over his nose and mouth, and placed them palm down on his knees. "Whatever exists," he said, "whatever in creation exists without my knowledge, exists without my consent." He looked about at the dark forest in which they were bivouacked. He nodded toward the specimens he'd collected. "These anonymous creatures," he said, "may seem little or nothing in the world, yet the smallest crumb can devour us. Any smallest thing beneath yon rock out of men's knowing. Only nature can enslave man, and only when the existence of each last entity is routed out and made to stand naked before him will he be properly suzerain of the earth." "What's a suzerain?" A keeper or overlord." "Why not say keeper, then?" "Because he is a special kind of keeper. A suzerain rules even where there are other rulers. His authority countermands local judgments." Toadvine spat. The judge placed his hands on the ground. He looked at his inquisitor. "This is my claim," he said. "And yet everywhere upon it are pockets of autonomous life. Autonomous. In order for it to be mine, nothing must be permitted to occur upon it save by my dispensation." Toadvine sat with his boots crossed before the fire. "No man can acquaint himself with everything on this earth," he said. The judge tilted his great head. "The man who believes that the secrets of the world are forever hidden lives in mystery and fear. Superstition will drag him down. The rain will erode the deeds of his life. But that man who sets himself the task of singling out the thread of order from the tapestry will, by the decision alone, have taken charge of the world. And it is only by such taking charge that he will effect a way to dictate the terms of his own fate." "I don't see what that has to do with catching birds." "The freedom of birds is an insult to me. I'd have them all in zoos." "That'd be a hell of a zoo." The judge smiled. "Yes," he said, "even so."
Boo. I scared you. Yeah, I scared you. What's good, bitches? It's your boy. It's your boy, AJP here today. Here are his the objectively best time of the year. And if you disagree, you're very, very wrong. On not only a subjective level, but an objective level as well. Halloween, All Hallows Eve, my favorite time of the year. I'm obviously already dressed up as my, favorite type, horrible druggy meth addict hobo. I kid. This is beginning stages of the costume I have, and obviously the discussion for, of course, one of my all-time favorite characters in all of fiction, about from one of my all-time favorite books. But of course, let's start discussing a bit of clarity. What am I going to be talking about this Spooktober? Is my scheduling going to get more consistent? Yes, maybe not. Who the fuck knows? All I fucking know is I'm going to be making some more videos this time of the month because I really fucking love Halloween and I like scary shit. And today we're going to be talking about my favorite thing. Horribly scary supernatural entities and of course existential dread and agnosticism, and just general horror of humanity. The Judge from Blood Meridian. Bar none, one of the best written characters in all of fiction, and what I highly consider as not only potentially one of the finest creators ever written, but written by bar none one of the finest authors in all of American literature. And if you say otherwise, I'm not really gonna listen. I kid. Anyways, Blood Meridian, one of my favorite books of all time. Right alongside the Book of Disquiet and let's see, the Book of Disquiet, Blood Meridian, obviously, and some other, more philosophical works. I have a very deep appreciation for this book, and it's bar none one of my most defining pieces of literature for me as an individual. And potentially that's one of the reasons why I sort of subscribe to a more or less misanthropic and pessimistic viewpoint of life. Similarly, for the actual history behind the book itself being a very important value. But we're not here to talk about necessarily the general idea of Blood Meridian or do an in-depth analysis on it. Well, somewhat in-depth analysis on it, because simply put, this is gonna be part 0 for the Blood Meridian analysis I'm gonna be fucking doing, because this book warrants multiple parts in discussing it, and this is nowhere gonna be near in depth for an actual proper discussion on what I consider bar none one of the greatest books ever written. Blood Meridian is a very, very beautifully written book, and also one of the most disturbing things I've read bar fucking none. It's hardly rare you ever see some of the most beautiful descriptions of hail or other forces surroundings, as well as a brutal depiction of what it was reality like on not only back then, but sort of the grim nature of humanity itself. But of course, that's not the discussion of what it is today. This is Spooktober, bitches, and it's going to be talking about, of course, the scariness of the world. Look at that. The scariness of the world. And we're going to be talking about one of the few characters in fiction that legitimately fucking horrifies me. Judge Holden, aka the Judge, or as I like to call him, in the fucking Inquiry, or what worse, a supernatural entity. The Judge Holden, is what I consider bar none one of the finest characters ever crafted within literature. He is a supernatural being filled with horrors and delights and everything along those lines, and he's an utterly charming individual, one that plays to his own tune, and he's surprisingly intelligent despite being a man of supposed southern descent. The Judge is, of course, a man who's able to speak apparently 6 languages, from Danish to even Native American and Spanish. And Spanish in really a lot of dialects, which is, totally not bizarre considering his nature. Also knows a lot about history and other such ideas, and similarly, chemistry. Things in chemistry they really shouldn't be thinking of, and ponders the ideas of alien life, and one could dare say the methodology and idea of God himself. The Judge is, let's make this clear, he's not human. The Judge is not a man. The things he knows, the things he does, the things he says, everything about his character is just pointing to the fact that he knows way too fucking much for an individual of his caliber. No man should be this intelligent. No man should be this smart. No man should be as adept as he is at the ways of war, and no man should not be able to die in the situation he has been unkillable for. The Judge is seemingly way too tall for a human, way too pale for even an albino, and is just an overall horrifying individual, just in general. And here we begin to sort of discuss why it is I find Judge Holden such a terrifying individual. Let's start with, of course, beyond his existential elements, beyond the narrative itself. Now, one of the things you can always find with Cormac McCarthy is that he really does do a lot of research within his works. And within his works of research, you, of course, find many fucked up things you wish you didn't know. Like, for example, I found out quite a bit about, of course, the fucked up shit that happens with the Comanche tribe, especially with my own Native American heritage to be concerned about, and as well as the Apache tribe as well. There's a lot to learn about, of course, what exactly the crimes committed by these native tribes were back in the day, as well as, of course, the various crimes committed by scalpers and other such individuals on the plains. And, of course, most interesting of this all is, well, need I say it, Judge Holden was a real person. I've seen people interpret and try to say that the Judge is some ghost, that he's a mystical legend of the fields, but no, Judge Holden was a real serial killer, he was a real scalper, he was a real person. And one of the things I think actually really does add to the horror of the judge is, and as well as just the fact of McCarthy's just in general writing when it comes to psychopathy and just overall pure evil, the methods of evil itself, as well as the metaphysics of his own native works and everything along those lines, his philosophy on the ideas of the consciousness. One of the things that really does make the judge just horrifying is that his real life counterpart is no fucking different from he is in the narrative. Yes, he's not necessarily a supernatural entity as he was in the narrative, but in real life, he was a child rapist and serial killer. In fact, one of the most common accounts you can find of the judge is, of course, within the Wikipedia page for McCarthy and discussing his ideas and what his inspirations were. And of course, the description was, as I will show here, was of course the judge basically entailing what it was he did to a little girl. And here we find the fact that he evidently, in the morning, despite him being an oddly charming individual, being overall humorous, kind, very flattering, very had good mannerisms, the next morning they found a giant handprint across the strangled, broken neck of a young 10-year-old girl, if I remember the age correctly, that was raped. And of course, everyone knows him because his hands were much too large and he was much too strong. And no one dared confront him because the judge was just terrifying. And the same goes for the rest of the posse that he ultimately leads within the book. And similarly, lots of the gang itself of the Joe Holden gang are real as well. From, of course, Glennon to even Toadvine to even the Black and the Delaware. They're all in some way a representation of not only the real Judge Holden gang, but similar to the real people that usually went out on the scalper plains. Because I'm be up in front of fucking about you, most people out of this fucking scalper years are just people out either looking for revenge, really extreme racists, divine destiny, divine right, divine manifestation, the right to destiny, or the conquering of the West. With, of course, the judge himself being apparently you can take as, being a living embodiment of this, being a living embodiment of human evil, being the living embodiment of war. Which is one of the reasons as to why the judge is also just horrifying to deal with. He's immortal. He legitimately can die. In fact, I am one of the proponents of one of the theories that, in fact, the judge has always existed since the beginning of time, to the point to where I ultimately believe that he is, in fact, Prometheus, that he was Ares, and that he was everything else before that. He was once potentially Zeus. He took on whatever form he desired throughout the years, and he would always remain because he can't die. And as the judge himself presents, he ultimately is a subscriber of the theory that he has since existed from the eon of time. And I would dare say the judge himself is God. He isn't Satan, but he could certainly take on the form of Satan if he ever so desired. He is the living incarnation of not only just evil, as I would say. I would dare to say the judge is in fact the living embodiment of conflict and primordial subconscious before it. He is the living idea of the metaphysical construct of war, and the living idea of the subconscious desire of men's conflict and need for it. The judge is a monster in every single way and fashion, and has existed before even the concept of destiny itself. One could say he's potentially the servant towards an identity greater than he is. One could say he's even an apathetic force that's simply partaking it. Or you can go into the route that he's primarily a Lovecraftian entity, that he's a more akin to Nyarlathotep than he would say the Book of Job interpretation of Satan or any such interpretations that would follow therein. The judge, similarly, what makes him so terrifying is not only within his own setting as he is, but his insane cruelty would probably make even Nyarlathotep, of all characters, appear more or less tame. Nyarlathotep, mind you, would make an entire civilization go fucking insane for the hell of it. The judge himself would commit mass rape and murder because he fucking can, and to prove a fucking point. What that point is, well, how do I say this? The judge's point is that you can't comprehend what he's doing. And necessarily the judge is kind of the answer towards a lot of questions. And yet the questions we answer are the ones he is in fact answering. Putting it simply, everyone wants to find a reason for why there is evil in the world. And in a way you can interpret the judge as being a sort of an idea of the very concept of evil himself. Better yet, you can view him as the answer to evil, in that there is no reason. Humans are inherently sinful and violent creatures, and if we were to go by the interpretation that the judge is in fact proving the point, he's essentially proving the fact that they're of a more gnostic kind of point of view, which admittedly I don't really subscribe to, because this would prove the fact that the judge ultimately thought of anything of value. The judge certainly seems to hold a bit of an appreciation for God and the Bible itself, but it seems more or less as an attempt for him to misconstrue it and use it for his own means. What those means are again unknowable, but we do know that the judge is effectively doesn't really have to try. He has the means of wealth. He has the means to become a governor. He can kill thousands of innocent people with the simple drop of a hat, and he can do whatever he wants or whatever he desires because he's immortal. He's just fucking with people because he can, and he seems to have somewhat of an interest in allowing humans to think for themselves and try to answer the questions he asks for them. Of course, it's even for the fact that the judge isn't really saying his viewpoint is essentially the absolute truth. What the judge seems to be doing is just trying to make people think about what it is he's even asking. Most people, again, just fall for what he's saying. So this is potentially saying, what is the judge's intentions? What does he want? And that's the thing. That's why I sort of say he's just the inherent need for conflict. There is no point to what the judge is doing. He is archaic violence incarnate. And he is the absolute truth of what evil is. Humans justify their evil with means by which they cannot needlessly comprehend. We find the broadest of ideas and attempt to subscribe to them the ideas by which we use to justify brutality. Whether it is the act of revenge, or is it the act of greed, is the act of money, is the need for war itself, the need for glory, the need for honor, whatever the case is, even God himself we use as a means of actually perverting and creating this means of justifying our brutality and our monstrous acts when there is no point of it. Effectively, humans possess this peculiar, almost metaphysical need to be vile creatures. And while certainly some people would say that humans are an inherently good thing, much of the judge proves that people will do small evils in order to try and get money and wealth. Even someone as supposedly innocent as a young boy who's just trying to make do would sell puppies to try and get money by. We inherent act of what we do. And one of the things the judge, in fact, does is just prove for the fact that the idea of moral law is not absolute, because at the end of the day, we subscribe these methods and ideas towards a higher court of power. And while you can certainly say this is an attempt by him to prove for the fact that the moral laws by which he applies are just a means of justification, the judge has a point. When we look back at historical law, we misconstrued the idea of Jesus Christ himself, a man who just simply wanted people to be nice, and just ended up creating something worse off for it. The Romans used their means of justice and power to kill Jesus Christ. People used their means of religious belief to kill and avenge he who died, even though he would not want that. And it's the inherent issue of humans that they are not necessarily going to follow any form of ordainment without perverting it. Even if it is straight up a divine intervention, we don't have necessarily the absolute biased view. And even if we were to say that Jesus was ultimately the correct viewpoint, how do we know what we know for him was actually correct? How do we know these ideas were necessarily perverted or slandered by those who came after him? And it's this case that really does just existentially make you think a lot. And what makes the judge so horrifying is that you can't really answer what he wants or what he has to say. He's just this malicious creature that doesn't even really necessarily care what he wants to do. He'll just link back, take a drink, commit some horrible atrocity to some poor bastards, and then just move on. It doesn't matter if they're boys, girls, men, women. He'll rape, he'll kill, he'll murder whoever he wants. And no one can kill him. And you think this will make the story boring, like, oh, fucking, there's no point in this. But no. The thing with the judge is that he's kind of weirdly fatherly. And that's what makes it him even creepier, in my opinion. The main character, the kid, doesn't really have any father figure. The one he does and did have was a very abusive individual. And in a way, the judge kind of represents the true nature of the kid. And we can see throughout the course, even without speaking a word, that the judge kind of cares for the kid. And the judge, when he shows these human values and these sensitive ideas, he becomes just more disturbing. This absolute form of evil is perversion of human ambition and will. This monstrous entity that isn't really human showcases this care for the kid in this odd way. These subtle acts like trying to help him, trying to learn, trying to teach him all these things. It's a weird love for the gang, even. Like, he's almost kind of mad at the kid for even thinking to betray them. Like, he feels legitimately hurt. And even worse is the judge's sense of frustration when the veteran dies. The judge just feels this visceral rage, like almost frustration that he lost someone. And it's so fucking creepy. It's so beautiful in a way. And it's one of the reasons as to why I sort of subscribe again to the theory that the judge himself is God. The judge himself is legitimately the idea of evil, like the idea of evil from the last chapter of Berserk. He is essentially the answer for humanity as to why their evil exists, and he's ultimate divinity given power. And it's just effectively the collection of egos, the collection of wills, of subjective beliefs have ultimately perverted the idea of God. God did not exist prior to humanity, but now since humanity needed an answer, God was birthed before them. They needed an answer in a creation, and they created it, and it's fucking horrifying. And it's just terrifying to even just fucking wonder that, man. The judge is such a fucking beautifully written character, and Cormac McCarthy's shown with No Country for Old Men, No Country for Old Men, No Country for Old Men, that he can write truly evil human characters. The judge's honor and the judge's sense of duty, the judge's sense of love for people, and his disgusting perversions in the same breath makes him one of the most fascinatingly realistic characters ever written. And that's alongside fucking Anton Churga, one of the literally world-renowned psychologists, calling him Anton Churga one of the most realistic depictions of psychopaths, a true absolute psychopath, out in not only film but just in media in general. The judge would be probably the other side of that, and I would dare say he's fucking surpasses it. And it's why I find his character so horrifying. This is part 0 to the Blood Meridian analysis, and I really do want to get into more into depth about the judge from a more scripted point of view, because I feel like this book deserves it, and I need to really gather my notes and discuss the ideas of evil and everything, and potentially fix this shitty lighting over here, because my face is like barely visible. But who wants to see this gorgeous face here? No one wants to fucking see that shit. No one wants to see that. But yeah, I really do think Blood Meridian deserves like a full, proper analysis, and I'm definitely gonna get it around to do that. It's basically gonna definitely happen, but I consider this book, bar none, one of the greatest things ever written. I highly recommend it. It's not gonna be for everyone. I know that. All I ask is you basically understand that it's a third-person omniscient narrative, and not even third-person omniscient, third-person objective. So only character communication by actions, dialogue, and nothing more. You find out what these characters are about by that alone. And if you were to say anything disingenuous, well, oh no. It's a fantastic book. The Judge is, bar none, one of the greatest characters ever written. And some of his dialogue is just, I consider The Judge, bar none, one of the greatest characters written, period. And I want everyone to experience his absolute genius. The Judge is the greatest character ever written. I adore him in every way. Please give Blood Meridian a shot, guys, when you can find the chance. You don't love it, you don't love it. I'm perfectly fine with that. I have no problem with people not liking the book at all. It's just a case of, if you're going to discuss it, just, don't do fucking retarded, disingenuous criticism. And trust me, you'll fucking know what I mean by that. Because trust me, I've seen some bad criticism of this book. It's fucking awful. You fucking know who you are. I definitely do plan to make more videos about spookiness in the future, so I hope to get that around to that when I can. I'm probably gonna make some videos on my favorite horror movies and my favorite horror books, which isn't a lot because I'm gonna be personally frank. There's no book that scares me besides like the ideas or concepts, and I haven't really felt any fear in a long while. Getting mugged does that to you, you know. Anyway, guys, this is the world of AJP. My beautiful, beautiful, fucked up world. And happy Halloween, you stupid motherfuckers. Let's celebrate and celebrate it good. See you guys later. If you have any questions or want to further discuss the ideas within the narrative, just link them down in the description. Link them down in the comments below. Support my Patreon or whatever the fuck. Subscribe, I guess. And I'll see you guys later. I'll try to fix this fucking brightness here. See you guys later. Have a wonderful day.
Floor slamming under the jackboots, and the fiddlers grinning hideously over their canted pieces. Towering over them all is the judge, and he is naked, dancing, his small feet lively and quick, and now in double time, and bowing to the ladies, huge and pale and hairless, like an enormous infant. He never sleeps, he says. He says he'll never die. He bows to the fiddlers and sashays backwards and throws back his head and laughs deep in his throat. And he is a great favorite, the judge. He wafts his hat, and the lunar dome of his skull passes palely under the lamps, and he swings about and takes possession of one of the fiddles, and he pirouettes and makes a pass, 2 passes, dancing and fiddling at once. His feet are light and nimble. He never sleeps. He says that he will never die. He dances in light and in shadow, and he is a great favorite. He never sleeps, the judge. He is dancing, dancing. He says that he will never die.